Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Moksha YLP series. My name is Jessenia, and I'm here with Carlo, Hunyah, and Ravindu, like always. And today's topic, we'll be delving into a little bit deeper into financial literacy and budgeting. So whoever joined us previously, we covered investing. So we will be going a little bit into that, but also more on the budgeting aspect and from, I guess, like a student or a millennials perspective. So yeah, let's go on right ahead. Okay, so that's kind of our outline for today. And let's get into it. So what is budgeting, right? So a budget is an estimation of revenue and expenses over a specified future period of time and is usually compiled and reevaluated on a periodic basis. So can I ask you all a question? What are some budgets that you guys have had to make so far, I guess, in your life? And, what's something that you do to help you kind of stick to that?
I'll go first. So a big one for me this year is budgeting out my tuition and rent fees, going back and forth from Toronto to Kingston and making sure that I have enough covered for each semester that I'm doing in my tuition. So a big thing that I've been doing is having more than one bank account is super helpful for that because I can set aside a little bit each money in my specific accounts that I know that I'm just going to be using for spending, and then accounts that I'm going to be just using for school and rent and that kind of stuff.
Right. So splitting it up. Yeah.
Yeah.
A good strategy.
Yeah, same thing. I've been kind of budgeting for my bills and like my car insurance, my phone bills, right? So I usually like to set those into like a saving account and every month transfer it back into my checking so the bills can be paid.
Awesome. Yeah.
For me, it's just bills, and on top of that, like if I have to save for vacation and stuff, so I'm gonna try to make sure that I try to use less money at the moment, and I try to save more. So it's like something I'm working on.
Right. And I think that's where like a long-term and a short-term budget kind of comes into play, right? If you see that you're having something coming up in the future, like a vacation, or you're looking to buy a car or something, then that's something that you're saving for long term. But then we have our short-term everyday expenses like food, rent, those types of things. Okay, let's continue. Okay, so many millennials have a hard time finding a job after college, and especially one that can pay the bills. And as a university student myself, I feel like this is, not far off from the truth at all. Many people that I know who have graduated in the past or are currently in school, you do find a hard time. It is a hard time finding a job right when you graduate because one of the main things that people are looking for is experience. And the thing is, when you do graduate, sure, you have the education to back you up, but you don't necessarily have the experience or the skills necessary. So can any of you guys speak on that? Maybe who have graduated and either had a hard time finding a job, or maybe
I can.
you had to find a job at somewhere where it didn't match necessarily your qualifications or something you studied.
Yeah, I actually had a challenge for quite a while. So I actually did work in college, and I did graduate and everything. So I thought I had enough money, but when I actually graduated from college, I had a whole new challenge, and it was with me. I had an accident, and after that, I was unable to do my paralegal licensing. So I didn't end up, like, I do have my diploma in there, but I couldn't get the licensing. So that was one story. On top of that, the other thing was looking for jobs. So I figured out I should start at retail. So I applied to like a billion retail jobs, and I couldn't find anything. Then along the way, I was also volunteering too. So it's like I was still hoping to get a job. Now, thing is, where I applied, it was useless because I wasn't that I didn't have too many certifications at the time either. So due to the last few years, I've been taking a lot of trainings and a lot of different. I've been volunteering even more, and then from there, that's how I actually got my job. It was actually through my volunteer work. It wasn't through I felt like it was like whatever we are told. It wasn't through that. It's like it's something not taught. You have to look like they're like unwritten rules of jobs. So when you go for a job search, that you have to figure out yourself. So for me, that's how I ended up working with three, four different places. So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great story, Hunyah, because a lot of the times, the path that you think you're supposed to go down, right? Graduate, find a job right off the bat in your field, it doesn't always lead to that. Sometimes you have to end up working in 3 or 4 other jobs that are totally unrelated to gain some kind of experience, whether it's customer service or if you're using a certain software or whatever it is. And then, as you mentioned, sometimes it could be volunteer experience. Sometimes it doesn't necessarily always have to be paid experience that gives you that leeway or that in somewhere. And yeah, I agree. I think through my personal experience too, volunteering has helped me, open a bunch of doors, even for Moksha itself, first learning about it in high school and then working there in university. It's kind of leads down that path. So yeah, thanks for sharing. Let's continue on. Okay, so what are the financial struggles of youth? So there are obviously are a variety of financial struggles that youth in our society has. One of the most prevalent ones is definitely student loans. Whether you are in college or university, or doing a few courses on the side, when you're in your 18 to 24 is kind of that prime time, I guess you could say, as a student, where you are racking up those loans and then trying to pay them off, I guess, for the next few years. And then you have your miscellaneous debts, of course. As a 20-year-old, you do have other expenses that you want on yourself as well, such as spending time with friends and family or traveling and all of those things. And then coupled with the fact that they're low wages, that's definitely another struggle, that you're unable to kind of meet that inflation that I feel that's been going on in our society, especially in the last few years. And a lot of people have even been speaking about COVID inflation and the fact that in the last year and a half, because businesses are so short of labor and workers and supply, for example, they've had to really hike up their prices of materials or services as a result of that. So in turn, they are paying lower wages to their employees, and that's definitely affecting the youth of our society today. Okay, so what should today's youth know about saving? So I think saving is something that, we first learn about it when we're young, and it's something always kind of in the back of our mind, but how much are we consciously doing it, right? We a lot of us have a savings account, but to make an effort and to put some amount into it every single month or every single week, whatever it is, and as Ravindu mentioned last time, not only having a savings account, but also an investing account as well, and investing in those things such as mutual funds are really important. So, for example, as mentioned here, interest rates rack up a lot of debt. So, for example, if you're not paying off your credit card on time and you're continuously waiting on that and you're living almost beyond your means, that can rack up a lot of debt that'll leave you in troubling times for your future. So that's something important to remember. Another thing is that saving should be a daily conscious habit, and I think that by implementing that into your weekly or monthly routine and making an outline and making a plan of what you want to do short term and long term, and what your goals are, that'll definitely help you to consciously save every single day. So can I ask you guys, what do you guys do to make sure that you are putting some money away every single month? And whether it's into a savings account or investing account, and making sure that you're kind of living within your means.
For me, I have every month around like $200 going into my investment account. And then also one more thing about the credit card I want to talk about a little bit is when you guys when you're paying a credit card, don't pay it monthly. Instead, what I do is I pay the full amount like in about 30 days. Because if you pay a credit card monthly, you'd still rack up interest rate and it still does get bad for you and it doesn't help your credit score, right? So
Mhm.
one thing I do is pretty much all my expenses I would use my credit card for, like grocery shopping, all this little stuff, and then every end of the month ish, I would pay it off completely just to build my credit score up.
Right.
Right. No, that's super smart. I actually should start implementing that too. I just had to use my credit card for my Airbnb for my next stay in Kingston, so I have to work on paying that off. But yeah, I mean, for me, it's sort of like I write down. I don't know about you guys, but I write down how much I'm going to set aside in like a small little journal I have, like whether it's like each week or like every second week or something like that. Kind of whenever my pay periods are for my works, like my jobs, like they whenever they line up, I write it down in my journal. I say, okay, like, do my budgeting for that month. Like what am I going or that week, whatever it may be, like what am I going to save? What am I going to put away? What am I going to use for my spending here? What things am I needing to spend on in this particular week? Like that kind of thing. And I know we'll get more into that later on in the presentation. But yeah, like that daily conscious saving habit of like maybe skipping the $5 drink at Starbucks today, like it could be something as simple as that. I think for me sometimes like, do I need to grab that coffee? No, I'm good. I got coffee at home because like they add up after a while. Like little things like that, right? I've gotten much better at making those daily choices of like not spending too much money on things like coffee. And I feel like that's like a really good saver for me personally, as I'm sure my blood level is just 90% caffeine. So, but I love it. Very, very on par with what I'm about to. So
For me, I have like a reminder for each month to give $200 to my student loan. So that's what I do every month. On top of that, my interest is like I have it on auto pay, so it automatically pays my interest each month. And on top of that, when it comes to like daily choices, like for example, like Ricardo mentioned about Starbucks, I usually have cash on me every time I go for to go into the food court, and I usually prefer to use cash in the malls, and I keep the other money that I have in for saving for bigger stuff. So that's what I do.
Very
Nice, yeah.
That's
One thing I want to mention about like student loans, I think a lot of people our age have that, and it's sincerely one of the worst types of debt there is because you can't actually ever get rid of it, right? I don't know if you guys ever heard the saying like even if you claim bankruptcy, student loan doesn't go away, right? So it's so important for a lot of the younger generation and people our age to make those student loan payments fast as you can and get rid of it quick as you can.
for sure. Oh, awesome. Thanks, guys. Okay, let's continue on.
sorry, I forgot it was me.
And yeah, I wanted to discuss this rule a little bit. And I know a lot of people, my peers, some of my friends my age, kind of like to stick to this rule because it kind of breaks up, your monthly revenues and where you should be allocating them. So 50% to needs. So that's anything such as groceries, your rent, your car payment, all of those types of things. 30% to your wants, that's just shopping, eating out, all of those types of things, entertainment, and then 20% goes to your investing or savings account. So I think by having like, a rough rule, obviously it's dependent on your certain lifestyle and the things you need. If you can put more to savings, that's great. If you sometimes, if you're going on a vacation that month and your wants are kind of increased, that's okay because you've kind of looked at it from a long-term perspective. So I find this rule especially really helpful. I think, I spoke to someone at my bank and she also recommended this as well. Just to kind of have a rough outline of how you should be, spreading out your wants and your needs and everything like that. And I think, as a student, if you're living at home, obviously that is a cost saver. And you're not paying for things necessarily such as housing or utilities if you're living with your parents, but as you do grow up and move out, then those are things that definitely come into play.
That's a great rule. Yeah.
Okay, so these are characteristics of someone, who budgets wisely, and I thought that they're all pretty important. So definitely being future oriented, right? Not looking too much in the short term, because a lot of the times that can, lead us to choosing something just based on what we want in that moment. But when you have more of a long-term perspective and are kind of weighing the, the next things that you want to do in a year rather than in a week or a month, that kind of lets you budget more effectively. And staying calculated, personally for me, I'm definitely a numbers person. And even if you're not necessarily, I think having some kind of, journal, as you mentioned, Carlo, or an Excel sheet where you can kind of break up all of your expenses and make sure you know what's coming in and what's going out. Because I know, as a student for myself in university, coming back, in September, it was our first month. There's so many expenses that go out every single day and you don't even realize they're happening, right? But by taking a step back, I think once a week or bi-weekly and looking at your account, what's going in, what's coming out, and making sure that's in line with what you expected is super important. Another thing is patience, right? Patience is really important because you want to make sure that you are being patient when you're working towards those goals, whether it's saving for something long term. Obviously, as we learned through Vindu's presentation, like money doesn't grow overnight, but it does grow if you do put it in the right places and you continue, investing it throughout your time. And the last thing is able to delay gratification, and kind of want to, we'll talk about this a little bit more throughout, but that gratification that sometimes we want, or, we feel like it fuels our happiness or is a booster all of a sudden when we purchase something that we want, or it's something that's really expensive that's been on our mind. Not to say that you shouldn't buy stuff that you want once in a while, but I think a lot of the time there is like an instant gratification that you receive, that happiness for a few hours, but then you realize after, oh my gosh, like what have I put myself in instead, right? So it's important to kind of balance those two things out in order to, remain stress-free and not feel like you have a bunch of debts that you have. So okay, so these are some more habits, that I think we kind of covered throughout. So people, some habits to always consider is to live within your means, planning and budgeting wisely, and always finding additional income sources. So I know you guys spoke about that last week about having a side hustle or having something that, is not necessarily what you necessarily, expected, or your monthly money coming in, whether it's, an extra $100, $200, like it does make a difference. And I think everyone should have something on the side, right? Whether it's a hobby that can lead to making money, or it's something that, you can help your community through, and having those additional ways can definitely help to combat, putting something into your savings and increasing your investing account, for example. Okay, you can continue on. Okay, and this is kind of an outline of, where your money should go monthly. So you definitely want to have something in your savings, then you have your bills and utilities to pay, your insurance, and then your emergency fund. So as we mentioned before, like the emergency fund is super important because you never know, especially in today's environment, where a job could go, or when you'll need, expenses because of an unknown, an accident could happen or anything, right? So having that emergency fund that's can be your savings for at least, 3 to 6 months, let's say you have to be unemployed, is really important. So yeah, those are, I think, four of the places where you should budget your money for the month. Okay, controlling impulse purchases. So I wanted to hear from you guys. What are some ways that you guys are able to control those impulse purchases? Because I know for me it's hard, especially when there's so many new things with technology and things are trending and we all want to be part of something. And sometimes, purchasing can almost make you feel like you're part of a community, right? Whether it's something specific or there's a brand of something. I remember, especially when I was in high school and, elementary school, and all the girls would buy a certain brand, you felt like you had to do the same thing just to fit in. And, maybe it's not as much as we're getting older, but there's still impulse purchases and stuff like that. So how do you guys kind of refrain from it, or any strategies for that?
I have a terrible habit of spending. So with me, I'm still working on that. That's all what I could say.
Maybe something you could do is kind of like let's say you were gonna buy this like $200 pairs of shoes, but you don't really need it. Maybe something you could do is like, okay, what if I invested this $200? How much will I have in 2 to 3 years, right? And then you could look at it like that. Oh, it might have grown to $1,000, right? Maybe that's the way you could do it.
I'll
Carla, what do
try
you
Now
think?
that.
I can buy 2 pairs of shoes.
Yeah, exactly.
3 pairs of shoes.
Exactly.
I think for me, it's like, you're fighting the angel on one side who's like, exactly like you said, no, like keep it, save it up. You don't need this right away. And then on the other side, it's like, yeah, but those Nikes are so fresh, right? And it's like, you want to get those shoes so bad. So I'm definitely still dealing with that a little bit, that battle that's there.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. For me though, it's kind of like how I mentioned earlier, how I kind of like just do a mental check-in right before I go into that Starbucks or I get that coffee. I was like, oh no, I don't actually need this today. Like it's not a big deal. I tend to like, I feel like I tend to like save maybe like, one day out of the month where I'll buy something that makes me happy. You know what I mean? Whether it's, a nice new pair of shoes or like a nice shirt that I like, and I think for me, just limiting myself a little bit more and doing those mental check-ins when I want that kind of stuff, like definitely stops my spending habit and makes my impulse purchases a little less obnoxious. I know for me, like the biggest thing was I wanted the Apple Watch so bad. And I wanted to get it right away, but I held out on it, and I ended up getting a better one because I held out on it. And I did that mental check-in where I was like, wait, I'm just going to wait a little bit, see if a new one comes out. And it did. And I actually ended up spending less on it than I would have. And it was a better version. So sometimes those little mental check-ins can do wonders for you as opposed to just doing these impulse purchases. But like I said, I still have that battle between that angel and that demon that's like, oh, but those shoes are so nice though. They would be perfect for that outfit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have that when it comes to Amazon. It's like I have to think like 2 3
Right.
times, do I need it or do I know it? Because like online shopping is actually more attractive at this time than in-person shopping due to COVID. It's like everything you see online, you want to get it.
Right. Yeah. My latest thing on Amazon was the big like 2,000 milliliter water bottles. Right. And I ended up getting one for, I think like $10. But for a while there, I was seeing them on Amazon and they were offering them for like $40. And my spending habit, my impulse purchase habit was like, oh, go click, buy it now. Right. But it was one of those things where I held out and I waited and I saw this version that was less expensive. And I was like, oh, great. I can just go for one of those. But Amazon's a big one for that. That one can be really difficult. What's that, Hunyah? Is that
Like
one too?
this is actually part of my branding, so I actually spent like $290 on this, and with me it's
blurry,
like
Hunyah.
yeah.
Yeah, we can't see it.
Okay, let me show you. Okay, let me fix this. Yeah, so here's an example. So for this, it was actually like $290 on this, but it was like
Okay.
I was using it. I was getting this for myself for my branding.
Right.
But like later on, I tried to give it a break, but it's like no, I need to get more. So now I'm trying to like give it a break to my to get through my branding while
Right.
maybe save it for something better.
Right.
So, yeah.
And
Yeah.
there's this really smart thing that I heard the other day, and it was like you should always do like the 48-hour test before you want something. You
Right.
look at it, wait 2 days. If you still really want it, then you can consider buying it. But a lot of things are literally just it's our emotions almost playing games with us, right? We see it and it's almost like I have to have it. But I realized for myself a lot of the times I'll wait even 15 minutes and then it's not as appealing anymore. So
Absolutely. All chemicals, right?
Yeah.
Just chemicals in our brain telling us what to do. No big deal.
Yeah, it's really hard to appreciate the need and want.
For sure.
Like that's why I'm giving a break to actually like spending a lot, and actually I'm trying to get in the habit of saving because I'm really terrible at it.
Yeah. No, I think it's a skill that everyone, no one's ever perfect at it, but you just keep on working on it every day. So
Yeah, I know for a while there when we were in lockdown, for me it was buying PC parts and like computer gear because it was all that I was interacting with like at all times when we were in lockdown, right? And it was kind of just like, okay, yeah, I realize how much I'm actually spending on this now. I have to take a step back and like reflect on what's actually happening.
Yeah.
but I feel like during that moment I spent more than I should have because we were in lockdown and it was almost like there was nothing to do. I don't know if you guys agreed with that, but it was like,
I
yeah,
agree. That's
yeah,
happened to me.
yeah. Like you said, Anya, like I found myself on Amazon, right? If we're like
Yeah.
looking at things I definitely did not need. So that rule of like waiting a day or two comes in handy so much.
I think I did the same thing in like when COVID started. I actually built a new
Yeah.
PC for like $4,000. So
I feel
definitely
like
not a
most
need.
people I
Give us
talked to
books.
built a PC during
Yeah,
lockdown who are like into computers, right? Because it was just like the thing to do when you were in lockdown. But
yeah,
Well, like
yeah,
building your own computer.
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Oh, wow. Okay. I didn't know that.
yeah. Which is a expensive hobby to say the
Yeah.
It
least,
is,
right?
yeah.
For me, it was books and branding. That's all. But pretty much I did. Like the good thing is, at least I do have the stuff I need for the near future. But the thing is, it's like the money that went in there. That's the only thing. Is like what comes up each time. Every time I think that okay, maybe I should wait.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, for me it's definitely the clothes, and especially during lockdown, you didn't need to wear anything anyway. So what was the point in buying it? Now I've
Right.
looked back a year later, I have all these clothes that I, shouldn't have bought or anything, and
Yeah.
kind of it's a waste now. So I think that also, you have buyer's remorse after purchasing those things. So
Mhm.
it's like a wave. You start at this high when you're about to buy it, all these emotions are running through, but then it's like that instant gratification that eventually fizzles out because it's not like a actual source of happiness.
Yeah,
So
and
Yeah.
later, those clothes and all these things go into the thrift store later on. That's what happens
yeah,
for the
well, that's
most.
at least that's better. Donating it is better than throwing it out or anything. So I'd say put it in the thrift store,
Yeah.
donate
If
it.
it's still in good condition, for
Yeah.
sure. For sure.
Okay, so now let's get into a little bit of ways to save for retirement. And this was kind of a neat, trick that I saw a few times online, and I thought, why don't I share this? So some saving factors to help you on your journey is taking your salary, right? Let's say your salary is 50,000. Okay. And they recommend by age 30 to save 1 time your salary. Then by age 40, you have 3 times. By 50, you have 6 times. And by retirement age, you have about 10 times your salary. So I know it can seem, daunting at first. Like, of course, $50,000, how am I going to reach it up to 10 times the amount by the time I'm 65 or whatever? But I think a combination of, investing and saving can definitely help you get there. And having like these short-term goals, every 5 years rather than something that seems too far and unattainable is a good way to have it. So Ravindu, what do you think about this plan?
So can you explain to me again? I quite didn't get it like the
Yeah,
first
for
time.
sure. So your salary, right? Let's say you make
Yeah,
$50,000 a year. So
yeah.
by age 30, you should have 1 time your salary. So you should have that 50,000.
Oh,
Then
like saved up.
saved up. Yeah.
Okay, okay.
So do you feel like this is realistic or
Uh, it depends. I think when it comes to really retirement and long-term goals, it's all about like what type of lifestyle you want to live in, right? So I think this has a good point, but also it's better to kind of what we call it is like our fin number, and it's like the financial independence number,
Mhm.
is like how much money you need at that age and figure out that end goal and then work from the beginning, right? So it kind of has a little bit like this, but yeah, I guess it's that way, their way of saying that.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. No, I guess, obviously like this is a rough estimate, and obviously if you know that in your retirement you're going to want to do those other things like travel and maybe invest in another property, then you definitely want to obviously save more. But I think this is a good rough outline if you're just beginning. Okay, let's continue on. Okay, so these are some other, tips when you're saving, thinking about retirement, or even the future. I know for a lot of us, retirement seems like a long ways away, but I think it's never too early to start. So one of the first things is to pay off your debts, right? So making that zero is super important because then it gives you the leeway, and everything else that you earn now becomes your revenue, and you're not, paying other debt off. Another thing is maintaining that good credit, like we talked about. So every 30 days, paying it on time. That's super important because, missing it once in a while, it then becomes a habit. And once you form a habit like that, it's really hard to, break a habit, especially when it's negative and it only keeps on piling, the interest keeps on piling up. Um, Investing in real estate and insurance, like we talked about the stock or bond market, right? Depending on your level of risk and how much you're willing to take on. And then in mutual funds, I think, as we mentioned last time, mutual funds are a great way to begin investing, or even if you want that, long-term, slow, steady growth, because you are investing in a variety of stocks and bonds at once, rather than just a single entity. So it kind of diversifies your portfolio in that way.
Yeah. Let me ask you guys a quick question about like purchasing real estate. Do you guys think it's an investment to buy yourself like a first home and kind of live there? Do you think that's an investment or not?
I would say so.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would say so because, land appreciates, obviously, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, you are spending 25, 30 years paying that off. So it's kind of, it's tricky.
Okay. Yeah, so the reason I ask is actually if you read the book Rich Dad Poor Dad, he talks about this, and what he says is a lot of people think that buying a home and living in it is an investment, where it's technically not, because the growth of that home typically is very little, right? And it's like you're in debt, right? But if you purchase a home and rent it out, that could be considered an investment, right? So
Mhm.
that's something interesting to think about, is like you got to think, okay, buying a big house, is that really worth it? Or maybe buying a property that has some rooms and renting it out where I can make an income and that pays its own mortgage. Is that an investment? Right.
Yeah.
So that's something to think about when buying a home and looking into it, because mortgage, actually, I remember mortgage is one of the biggest debt, and it's like one of the number one reasons why most people can't save, right? It's
Mhm.
because it's a lot to take in. Actually, I want to search up the definition of mortgage. I know it's had some cool meaning to it. Let me just pull it up here 1 second.
I think it's French for something, isn't it?
I think it means like uh forgot. There was like a saying for it, but 1 second. I forgot, but there was like a Greek saying or something like that, where it's like the mortgage means kind of like loan for almost like ever, right? Because it is a long time, 25 years, right? So yeah,
Uh,
so it's
Because
something
the
to think
word
about.
mortgage literally means death pledge.
Yeah,
Like
there you go.
you're
That's
kind of
what
paying it off. So
Right.
exactly. So it's pretty
Wow.
much paying till you're dead, right? What it means. So it's something really interesting to think about, and something to think about now especially is most people think if you buy a mortgage, it's good to pay it off fast, right? Like if you buy a house, pay it off fast as you can. But
Mhm.
have you guys heard that before?
mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
but it's actually not good to do that. It's better to, instead of paying off fast, it's better to invest somewhere else that has a higher interest rate. Because typically, mortgage interest rate is about 3% or 2%, which is very low, right? And if you guys use rule of 72, you know how fast it's gonna double, so it's gonna take a long time. So yeah, that's my thing on mortgages and real estate.
But wouldn't you say, like, in especially, where we are in Toronto and this market in general, the way that like housing prices have like tripled, I'd say, in the
Yeah.
last 10 years, 10, 15 years. In that case, I feel like even real estate for yourself, even if you're not investing it or even if you're not renting it out, is still in that case a good investment, right? Because all of these
It
properties.
depends. I think at the end is if you're living there or you're investing it and it's paying itself, I think it's a good investment. But yeah, I think for you guys to really understand kind of like what I'm saying, dive a little bit into the rich dad poor dad, because the one who taught him that, his rich dad ended up owning like all the hotels in Hawaii, right, in all those properties. So he used like that tactic of, okay, this is how, the rich people do it, and this is how the poor people do it. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay, awesome.
I
That's
was
so
gonna
cool.
say one thing. There is, I think, a percentage for real estate each time, because I know my brother, he's looking into real estate as well. Like he's trying to get a place for him to rent out soon and probably get his own property soon. So one thing I've gotten to know is that it's sometimes it's a percentage of how much is a realtor going to take from you when you purchase a real estate market with that. Like, when you look at the types of houses or condos or whatever kind of type of like real estate it is. So I think that's like something to mention in there.
Right. I had a
So
conversation with a friend who actually purchased a property close to Western University, and it was for student housing. And it's super smart what she did. She purchased the home, and then she knew the students who were living in it, and each month the students paid rent, which went towards the mortgage, and it went towards an income for her as well.
Yeah.
And so she's paying off the house, right? And the house is worth more money now. I think like over $180,000 more than what they bought it for, perhaps more. But she actually paid off the mortgage with the rent that the students were paying, and it made me think about how intelligent an investment property would be for student housing near a
it
university.
is
And I was
100%.
even thinking about for even by Queen's University, there are all those student housing that I've seen. Yeah, it's such a smart investment to invest in a property like that, a real estate property like that.
It is, yeah. Especially
Definitely Waterloo, like
especially
that,
a,
like
yeah,
around
go
that
for it.
area. There's a lot of investments that I've heard of.
Yeah.
Yeah, and especially a property that does have a lot of rooms, like we were talking about, that can generate more than one income, right? Because if you only have one house that has one room, technically you can rent it out to one person. But if you have multiple rooms, you can get like a lot of students, and typically take $600-700 from each person, right? And
Yeah.
that
I
can
think
make you
that's
a ton
what,
of money.
a lot of landlords, especially like where I go to school, that's what they do. Like, for example, even if they have a large living room, they'll make it a small living room and put in 2 bedrooms on the top floor, or
Mm-hmm.
they'll make multiple units. Like, for example, the place that I'm renting out has, I think, about 13 or 14 kids living all together because there's like 3 separate units. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's definitely a good investment. I know one guy actually at my who's our age, he ended up, instead of renting a place, he bought a place and is then now renting it out to 4 other students, and he's living there himself. So
Yeah,
yeah, that
that's
helps.
not a bad idea. That's still that would be considered an investment, because
Yeah.
technically you're living somewhere that's paying for itself,
Yeah.
Right.
right? So imagine that cost is completely gone. And
Right.
typically that would cost you $700. So it's like you're making $700 a month,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So it's really cool how that real estate market works, but it does come with like a lot of like hassle, I would say, because my brother did have like a real estate property here in Alberta, and we had some really bad tenants. So you really need to know kind of like the laws and with all that, because we had some people that ruined the house completely. We had to do like $5,000 worth of repair. We rented out to another lady who was supposed to just be there with her family, but instead it brought more people and became like, a drug place. It was crazy, right? So really, when you're looking into that, you got to look at like, who am I renting it out to? Are they, credible, right? Because sometimes real estate can be a headache.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say, it's like, obviously it sounds great in theory. You buy the place, you rent it out, but being a landlord is definitely not an
No.
easy task at all, and it comes with a lot of responsibility and all of those things. So
and
a
and
lot.
sometimes the tenants don't even pay, right? And then
Yeah,
there's rules, like especially during like COVID, you can't like kick them out, right? So
Mm-hmm.
technically you're paying for your own mortgage and you're
yeah,
losing money. So there's a lot of laws that go into it. So it's
yeah.
it's good to study it before you jump right into that market.
And one
Mm-hmm.
thing is really for real estate in other places. And one thing I know is when I was on vacation in Dubai, actually in 2018, what we were told there from one of my aunt is that if the let's say if you don't give if you don't pay your rent in time, the government they could just take you in, and then they could like charge you on that. So that's the regulation there. So here, so I think regulation matters a lot. And then for Ontario, there's a lot of landlord and tenant laws, because I remember I remember I read this in my in paralegal studies, that that have to be applied, and often people don't know about it. So if, like, let's say that you want to get them, if you're like trying to build something in there and you want to get them to go, and you want to like get them to, I forgot the right word, I was not sure if it's convict or is like something else, then there's a whole procedure to that. And then there has to be a certain timeline in there where you have to go and inform the tribunal as well as the tenant and the landlord, and if there's a dispute in there. So that's something.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was actually looking at this graph. It's like the last 20 years of like Toronto real estate. It's really interesting to see. Like back in 2000, if you were to buy like a condominium, that would typically cost like 141,000 now. Today, or like back then, today that would cost about $600,000,
Oh
right?
my
So
gosh.
it's pretty cool, the growth of Toronto and the economy there,
Mhm.
Yeah.
right? So yeah, if you were a really early investor, that's a really good time for you to make a lot of money.
Mhm. All right. Okay, so now these are some of the goals that I think everyone should, work towards throughout their lives, and trying to attain obviously that financial freedom. Is the first step is to stop living from paycheck to paycheck, right? Having that flexibility where you are able to save and invest and enjoy obviously some of the luxuries is one of the goals that everyone wants to attain eventually. Another thing is to save at least 3 months pay, right? Again, that emergency fund, ideally, making it larger, but at least 3 months is a good way to start in case of anything that can come out of the blue, right? Um, Another thing is always saving the maximum when you can. Stopping, those small expenses that we don't necessarily know add up. Like Carlo mentioned, the coffee, or maybe eating out for lunch when you can easily make it at home, or doing some simple swaps, right? If you still want a coffee when you go out, going to McDonald's instead of Starbucks, right? You're still enjoying the same thing, but it's just at a lower price point. And then finally, diversifying your investment portfolio. So having a variety of different things so that if the market goes up and goes down at the same time in different, areas, for example, in different industries, you're not being hit so hard. So yeah, I think those are my 4 tips overall. And Carlo, if you want to continue on from
Yep.
there.
Yeah, so I came across this. I thought it was really interesting. It was this concept of budgeting categories, right? And I think it's a pretty simple term, but it's just kind of expanded in this way. So like we kind of touched on this already, but you have your savings for short and long-term purchases, right? So we're talking about like college fund, we're talking about things for like a car, a laptop, the retirement savings. And then you'd have things like budgeting categories for your necessary expenses. So I kind of wrote down some things for me that are my necessary expenses, right? So like, gas money is a huge one. I'm driving back and forth from GTA to Toronto every day. So that gas money definitely adds up. That's a necessary expense. Your phone bill, obviously, we need to have our phones, our line of communication. Sometimes lunch money, it's not ideal every single day to pack a lunch. So you're going to have to go and buy lunch sometimes. And then other expenses like a gym membership or any of the subscription services that you're on. I know Spotify is an absolute necessary thing for me to have. So that's like definitely would be on this budgeting category for sure.
Or Netflix.
Netflix, I mean, like, come on, right? Like our Amazon Prime membership, right?
Yeah.
Like those are things that, I typically don't think about, and they kind of just like come out of my account. But lately I've been seeing how much I'm actually spending on my subscription services, and I feel like I can cut down a little bit while also still wanting to add Disney Plus to that as well. So there's that. But we talked about like other food, going out for dinner, treats. I'm not a huge fast food guy, but I do like to, grab a Timmy's breakfast here and there, and that can add up, even though it's not as expensive as some of the other places. Clothes and accessories, grooming, beauty services. Like I know for guys, like I have a whole bunch of shaving products that I probably spend too much money on because I like to keep a nice clean shaved face. But that's a necessary expense, and it's things like that, right? I mean, like things for entertainment, things that you need, right? Activities. If you're a part of a sports team, sometimes there can be a little bit of a fee for that. I was playing soccer for a while, and they needed that. Yeah, so having a category for the things that you spend. And then there was this really cool concept. We already touched on the 50-30-20 rule, which is really awesome. And these other two, I don't know if you guys have heard about them before, but I stumbled across them. It was zero-based budgeting and pay yourself first method.
Yeah,
So,
pay yourself first method.
Yeah,
I heard
this
that.
one I've kind of been doing already, and I didn't really know it was like a method, and I thought it was like super interesting. But it just means essentially that you immediately put a certain amount or percentage of your income into savings. So right away, you're paying yourself. Whatever money's left over can be spent on however you choose. And I think I've kind of been doing that for years without really realizing what kind of method it was, but this is putting it into words. And I think this is kind of super important to do and to think about, especially if you're a guy like me who is, still hopefully last year of tuition, fingers crossed. But yeah, still paying the tuition and the rentals at the same time. This kind of stuff is necessary. And then budgeting out, like those budgeting categories that we talked about, not only thinking about the long term, but also this kind of short term stuff, things that are going to be coming out of your account monthly. And figuring out where you can save in these areas too. Because I know for me, like I tried a bunch of different gyms at first, and I wanted to know which one was the most reasonable price for what I wanted, for what I was getting. And like just a side note, but like Good Life has a really great gym membership deal where you can get, I think I pay $31.99 a month and I get access to all the gyms in Ontario, which to me is like, it's
That's
perfect,
cheap.
right? Yeah, I mean, that's cheap. And if I'm back and forth from two different parts of in the province, it's like it's beneficial for me because I don't have to sign up for just one gym. So whereas others, I don't know if they have that kind of thing, but
I know Fit for Less has like $11 a month,
right.
right? For like,
Yeah, so like just finding things that work best for you depending on what your needs are, I think is
yeah.
super, super important. But yeah, that's the pay yourself first method. And then we have the zero-based budgeting. Have you heard about this one, Ravindu?
Not quite. Might have heard it, but in a different saying.
Yeah, so this method is essentially, it's based off the idea that when you subtract your expenses from your income, the result is zero. So that's kind of cool. So you estimate the cost of each budget category and divide your income up until you hit zero, right? Using those estimates as a guide. So if you're someone who kind of works in this manner, I feel like it could be a good strategy to use. And then there's also the 50-30-20 rule that we talked about too. And I think I might try and implement some more of that myself. But these are all really interesting methods that I think I'm going to kind of take into account and factor in for when I'm budgeting next. I don't know about you guys, but I have a lot of these on my list.
Yeah.
more than I realized, right? And it's like every month I'm kind of thinking about things and I'm like, oh, like my supplements, my protein powders, those aren't cheap. Like they really do add up. So it kind of, for me, I'm noticing it kind of comes at me a little quicker sometimes than I hope. It's like, oh my gosh, I spent how much money on food this month? What?
Yeah.
Right? Maybe I'll cut out some of those brunches or dinners that I've been going to. But yeah, I mean, another one is even taking care of pets. Really, how big of an expense can a pet be? It can be a huge expense. I was thinking about this because we were just discussing it at my Thanksgiving family get together. We were talking about not only how expensive it is to buy a pet, like a dog or something like that, but also just to get the necessary shots and everything to get, the dog to the proper state that it's supposed to be in. Right. And it's like another thing that's super expensive, the maintenance of pets.
Yeah.
For young people, it's a really great responsibility to own and take care of a pet, but it's also a big financial responsibility as well.
And time consuming.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I know people that spend, easily a couple of $1,000s a month on their pet, and
yeah,
it adds up, right? You have to the shots that they need when they're first born, for example, to protect them from diseases, and then the food, all of those things. So, I think the main thing is trying to find a balance, and that balance is so different for each person, right?
Mhm.
Because a lot of the times we look in we try to compare our lives, right? If there's another 20-year-old girl, I can easily say that, okay, our expenses should be the same, or we should have the same type of inflow and outflow, but that's so untrue. So
Yeah.
I think it's kind of about taking it for yourself and realizing it's not a competition. There's no comparing, there's no reason to think that, oh my gosh, by this age, why am I not here yet? Or I should be somewhere else yet. It's everyone kind of has their own journey and their own, struggle or whatever it is. And taking into consideration that, your budget too. I'm sure, like, for example, some months, obviously, maybe you have to kind of cut down on certain things, but then you're doing it for your future essentially, so that you are able
Right.
to have that flexibility and enjoy in the long run. So
Well,
Right.
one more thing that kind of popped into my head, because like those credit cards are there on the side. Like a little money hack that you guys can do is get a good credit card with a good, what's it called, cashback, right? So for example, if you have all these bills, most of us, we would use our debit card to pay. But instead, if you use your credit card to pay those expenses, you get what's called a cashback, right? And I have a pretty good one. It's a CIBC one. And you can actually get like free money technically for using your credit card, right? So that's another cool hack that you can do while building your credit scores while budgeting, right?
you know what the percentage is on that one for the
I think it is 4%. Let me just check real
wow.
quick.
That's good. Yeah. Even things like a Costco membership, for example,
Yeah.
2% cashback option for that one. And even though it's a little bit more expensive, I think up front, it does pay you back. So
Just gonna check.
I need to get my Costco membership back.
Had a cashback deal at some point. I was a few years ago. Like every time like you use your card, they actually give you money when you ever do your purchase.
Here, I'll show you guys something real quick.
yeah.
Just of the credit card before we end it out here.
Okay.
So yeah, this is like a one that you can have is like 3% for your gases, 2% for like dining and transportation and bills, and 1% in cashback. So it will build up. It's not like, oh my god, I'm gonna get a lot of money, but like small, it'll build up, and then eventually when you build up your credit scores, you can get better credit cards, right? And then it will build up with better cash back. So never use your credit card if you can't like pay it completely, but use it if it's like you can make the payments by end of the month.
Yeah.
I've had that experience once. I actually did get this credit card once from CIBC. It had this Tim Hortons thing to it. I thought it was like a new kind of credit card that they had for limited time. So I didn't end up using it, but when they charged me, like it was so much that after that I just like stuck to my debit. I didn't use a credit card after.
Right.
Oh yeah, you got to make sure that you're on top of the payments and double check.
Even some stores have their own credit card now too, right? Like there's a one.
Isn't there like a PC Optimum one?
I think
There
so.
is.
Yeah, it's like Walmart and stuff. So and you can earn points, and by using that credit card, you can win like trips and stuff. So
yeah,
it's technically free money. I actually watched this show on Netflix. You guys can check it out. It's called like Money Hacks or something. But one of the sessions was on credit cards, and it's talking about how credit cards companies have like these people labeled, and they mostly make money on people that tend to pay they don't make money on people that pay it completely every month, but they make money on people that miss their payments, right?
Yeah.
So credit card companies are always wanting you to miss their payments so they can make money. But if you actually pay your payments, you make the money, right?
That's interesting. Plus, there's also loyalty cards too that some stores have that come in the credit card form.
For sure. Yeah. Or even, there's so many things. There's the Starbucks reward points. McDonald's does, if you buy like 6 coffees, you get one free. Like they all add up over time, right?
Right.
So yeah, I think it's about sharing the tips you have with the people and just slowly every day working towards, becoming better. So
what I've learned as a student is to take advantage of every single one of those.
And coupons, guys. Coupons. You guys think, man, I use a lot of coupons.
That actually.
Me too.
I've actually done that a lot in college, like taking advantage of all those things.
Yeah.
Like it's beneficial as long as you're in there, but once you graduate, it's like you have to find different ways on how to get advantage of those things.
You use your
Mhm.
younger siblings when you graduate.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. A big one for me that I discovered when I was in Kingston was the grocery store did student discount days on Tuesdays.
Yes.
And so, right, I'm sure you know about that, Jess, right?
Yeah.
And it's that was a big surprise for me because we didn't have that at my undergrad school at Sheridan College. So I was like, yes, I got to take advantage of this. This is awesome. So yeah, it's about taking advantage of those things when you can, especially when you're young and you're on the come up, you know. But yeah, this was a good talk on budgeting. I think budgeting is one of those things for me that I can always improve a little bit more on, you know.
Mhm.
And I think that the pay yourself method that we were talking about too is like super important for myself to keep in mind.
Yeah. One more thing I do, guys, before we end it off here, is I usually keep all my receipts because I do have a business, and for like the business use that I can write off most of my receipts, right? So at the end of the year, I have to kind of put everything in an Excel sheet while doing the accounting and writing that off. So maybe that's something you guys can do is every month, like type it into like an Excel chart, like your expenses, so you know how much you're spending, right? So that way you can keep track of your expenses.
Yeah. And if you do have a business, even if it's a small like side hustle, those can definitely be billed as business expenses, right?
100%, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Awesome, guys. Thank you so much for all your tips. I hope everyone who's watching learned something new today. And again, feel free, continue asking us questions, engage with us on social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, where we'll be posting this recording. And yeah, thank you so much. Join us again on Thursday again for a new topic.
All right,
See you,
everyone.
guys.
Bye.
Bye.